Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the No Name Podcast. You're now in tune and locked in with the one and only J. Juju St. Paul. I have my man
Ish, what's going on, everybody? I am the CEO and founder of Dad Is Not a Now, and I'm a hip hop nerd.
like us all, and we have the one and only Shomari Smith, owner and founder as well of Skyfyre Productions. And we're here to break down the documentary and a little bit of his life and his experiences within the world of hip hop. So let's start it off. Shomari, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely, bro. Thank you for coming on. And then also, let me break it down too, man. This brother is like a Renaissance man. He is a director. He's a photographer, an artist. You can catch some of his work in the documentary on ESPN 30 for 30, The Hampton Five, which is based on Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, the Golden State era. And then also he did a project with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So this brother is just all over the place. So I just wanted to put that in the capsule.
You need to have fireworks. The whole night needs to be coming off with that stuff. My man's like 6 foot deep in gangsterdom.
Yeah. But real fast, how were you? Let's talk about that a little bit. How were you able to link up with the legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
Oh man, it's amazing how things happen sometimes. I been a visual artist for my entire life, and so it was an era, I would say, early 2000s, where I began to put together these. I was doing these athletes' portraits, and it initially just started from sort of grew up around a culture like of the Oakland Raiders. So like my dad, my brother, huge fans at tailgaters, and I started making these portraits for a lot of Oakland Raiders fans, like of different players, and I started expanding out and basketball stuff and baseball stuff, other sports, and Kareem was coming to the Bay Area for a book signing, and a lot of times I would either try to get a portrait signed or one of the things is I like to artists to be shared, and so I would make an extra piece if I had like um, artwork of someone. I'd love to like share it with them if I could, and so went to a book signing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I took one of my art pieces to give to him. Had it framed and everything, and was glad to meet him. And I gave him this piece of artwork, and I told him, like, you're really inspiring. Thank you very much. Like for just like being just an all around inspiration, because he's definitely someone. Just when you talk about the times now of social justice and um, just like becoming a voice outside of basketball. I was thanking him for that, and I was passing off some artwork to him, and that was gonna be it as far as I was concerned. Just sharing something with someone who was an inspiration, but his assistant stopped me on my way out, and she told me she really liked my artwork, and gave me her card and told me to call her. And so, yeah, that was how I linked up with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He came to the Bay Area for a book signing, and from there, I reached out and we started doing projects together. And so, yeah, it was probably around 2007. Um, I helped him out with some ads for his book On the Shoulders of Giants, and I created, I put together the the graphic design for his audio book that was a series of, I believe, the 8 volumes. So it was a huge project that took a long, almost like a year. I would say maybe a year and a half um, to design. And so yeah, not to mention, like just I did a bunch of artwork over that time too. So so it was probably a relationship that I had with Kareem, um, from maybe 2007 to about 2011.
Wow, that's dope.
And did I hear that right? It said it took you a year and a half to get that complete that project.
Yeah, it's a year and a
So was that
half,
just
and
that must have been hella revisions?
uh, like you would not believe, and it one of the big things at that time was the first time that I had ever worked in a environment where I did not. They were in Los Angeles and I was in Oakland, and just for purposes of people just understanding, like that is an hour and a half flight away, and or a 6 hour drive. So this is all done, you know, via technology at this time, and so I'm emailing files that are huge for that time. It's like
Yeah.
like now it's like it's a regular thing now to send files back and forth, to anyone anywhere. But at that
Mm,
time, I was really, like with my laptop and these large Photoshop files, and I was, like emailing back and forth, and they were really small changes, and they were all times of the day and night. So like, you know, I was past the dial up. Like I had something stronger than dial up internet at the time, but
mm,
it was definitely still very hard to work in that way, just because of
mm.
like how it was just it was a futuristic sort of environment where like I really wish that I had the technology that we have now for back then for all of the revisions. It was like day and night around the clock. I get phone calls at any time of day, three in the morning. I get a call from his assistants, and she would say, yeah, we like what you did. His foot moved a half inch over, and we need that immediately. And you know what I mean? So it like that sort of thing.
Oh, I
And
know.
she was dead serious. Yeah, she was dead serious too. Yeah, it was a great experience. Although just Kareem was amazing to work with, and it's one of those things I'll never forget. Like just to have an opportunity like that. Um, yeah, a project that had so much substance, to be a part of that is just amazing.
Definitely. And
Yeah,
then
that's
also, how
that's
did you?
amazing.
And then how were you able to get your artwork in the documentary 30 for 30, the Hampton Five?
Okay, so let me clear it up. So
Okay,
the
clear it up.
so I have a photograph that ran in a 30 for 30, and it was a photograph of Tiki Barber. So like, just as a photographer, you never know where you may end up, or why something may become valuable or sought after, whatever however you want to look at it. So I had a photograph that ran in a 30 for 30, about Tiki Barber and his brother, Rondé Barber, and it's a photograph I took while I was in New York at an event, working with CC Sabathia. And yeah, it just happened to be some rare photo that had all of Tiki Barber's kids with him in it. Like no one had a photo, I guess, of Tiki Barber with all of his children. And so it ended up in this 30 for 30 that ran, I would say, probably in, wow, maybe 2014, 2015, and that around that time. And with the Hamptons 5 portraits. Those are currently hanging in the new Chase Center in San Francisco, where the Warriors are now playing. Being a native of Oakland, they were, in Oakland for 40 plus years, like my
Mm,
entire life. And, it's tough to see them go across the bridge. They're, still here in the Bay, but it's tough to see him leave your hometown, but he selected as one of the artists who was able to display artwork inside of the new Chase Center over in San Francisco.
Wow.
Wow, that's
That's
amazing.
amazing.
And also, just to touch on another thing, to anyone who doesn't work in graphic design, like obviously, like like you do, I do, them revisions are no joke. I'm sorry, I just had to put that in there. When you work with certain people, that will take, that will consume your life. It takes a
Yeah,
lot, but I know you, massive props for that. I'm working with such legends. Sorry, Ash, I just had to stick that in there
No.
just for
oh no,
footnotes.
it is a real thing, but it's, like when that when that final product is done, and you get to see it and share it with the world. It's amazing.
Mm.
So it's that labor of love. I know that there, I don't know if there isn't one graphic designer that is not a very, very patient person. It takes so much patience. Um,
Yeah. Now, when you put it like that, actually, I need to give myself more props now. Okay, I duly
You
noted.
pat yourself on the back, man. Seriously. But you talk about when the Warriors moved to the new stadium. I think the one thing that's kind of been kind of underneath the surface is gentrification.
mhm.
Being a part of the Bay all your life, how has that kind of hurt when it comes to the historic path
Yeah,
of the Bay? You want to talk about that a little bit?
yeah, absolutely. This is definitely, I think, more so than I've seen in my lifetime here in Oakland. There has been, a huge influx in, just the property values have gone up to a ridiculous rate, where it's like, I mean, if you think about, we're in this pandemic now, but if you think about how a company like, Google can affect an area, how a company like Yahoo can affect an area.
Mm,
Um, we have Apple, there's Pixar, that we have all of these, Instagram. There are so many large tech companies here that, the their money is flowing like other industries aren't at this time. And so
mm,
they are, not only in the South Bay, where they, like Facebook. How can I forget Facebook? So Facebook is here also. Um, and like all of these companies have a bunch of employees, and they're moving into the more popular areas. So, predominantly the sort of nexus of that is San Francisco, which also, like you cross the bridge, and then we're in Oakland. And so they're buying up property, and it's like the property values are ridiculous. I mean, like, rent is ridiculous here, and it's all from that boom. Like, there's been, I don't know how many .com booms they call, the .comers. And so, and this has been happening. We've watched this happen. Wow, I would say since the late '90s, where
mm,
and this is a time where I was coming out of college, and that sort of transition from, um, doing things digitally started happening. And yeah, all of the neighborhoods that you would consider, like, and I won't say all of them, but a lot of the neighborhoods that you would consider no fly zones, where it's like, what goes on in that area, and
mm,
you're wise probably not to cross through there. Now, um, we are seeing people that you wouldn't usually see there, and people were knocking down houses and rebuilding something on, the land of the areas that were there. So, like, people are being pushed out to these other areas outside of places like Oakland or San Francisco, and they're living in these suburbs now. And it's it's just a weird dynamic because that for those who can do that, you know, I guess you consider them fortunate, but then like the homelessness here is beyond anything that I've seen ever. Um, People are displaced in a way that I haven't seen. It's a huge divide because there are those who have, and then there are definitely those that do not. Um, it's a huge gap between the two. It's almost like there's there's a small community of those who you would consider to be in the middle. It's like
Right.
people who have and people who just absolutely do not have. Yeah, so it's a tough dynamic here for sure. Very expensive place to live if you are not someone who has come from deep roots from the area for sure.
At the same time, do you feel like you're kind of losing the culture and the historical landmarks in a
You
way
know,
because of it too?
it is so that's something that I experience when I go other places. So like with California, and this is another thing that's really interesting. Like with California, it a lot of times you will find that there isn't that want or that need to preserve a building or a landmark like you see in other countries and even other parts of the United States. It's amazing. Like I'm so like I'd say in London, you can find like places where that were affected by the war or and really kind of have an understanding around the landscape. Here in California for sure, like anything from wow, my goodness, it's so hard to get a grasp of what was once here because things are knocked down and rebuilt so often. And a lot of that is, because of earthquakes, like 1906 earthquake, 1989 earthquake, where things just completely are collapsed and they have to rebuild anyway. And so sometimes it's that's part of it, but like just the history sometimes gets lost when those sorts of things happen. But culturally, my goodness, every place grows and changes over time. But I think that there there's a definite change in the culture, but because I am from here, I know where to find it, and I think that's the thing. It's like if you are coming from the outside, you come to the Bay Area, you come to Oakland, and you're looking to find where the culture lives, it would be very very tough to happen upon it. Probably the best way to put it. You have to know someone. You have to know where to go, where to be, um, to go and experience some of the culture that you may be more familiar with on the outside, for sure. It's tough, but it's still here. It's definitely still here, but it's harder to find for sure.
Definitely. And then also, Harlem had its renaissance. Brooklyn had its renaissance. If you go back to the days of Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing, you have so many artists that came from that time in Brooklyn. And then Oakland, the Bay Area had their renaissance, which I would say like early 90s, because you had great writers, you had great poets, you start seeing rappers come in the scene. So it's time to have a little nostalgia a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. So like talk about your introduction to hip hop at an early age and how it influenced you in your work today.
Wow. Well, my introduction to hip hop was definitely at its very, very beginning. It's so just with the rich culture that exists in Oakland, California, like it goes very, very far back. But I think like for me and my influences, definitely, like it comes through just the time of my parents' generation, just when it comes to like the influences that sort of fed into what led to our generation. So it's the Black Panther Party and that movement, um, and how we there's a sort of a culture of resistance to and just speaking out about what you believe in here in the Bay Area. And so that was, I think, the one of the first, just the idea of like being proud of who you are, I think, was a huge influence on our generation coming behind them. Um, but you talk about my introduction to hip hop. It was at the very beginning. I heard hip hop. I always say I grew up alongside it. Born in 1975. You talk about August 11th, 1973. I'm, hip hop's little brother. Right? It's like that whole notion. Um, and so it's amazing to sort of experience this thing that is done for someone like someone like you, and then done. It's like incredible to experience it. Like we were in Oakland, we were getting things I think a little bit later. Um, so like I'm trying to remember as much as I can. Like I had an older brother who my brother's 8 years older than me, and so he was fully in the mix of whatever was going on and was bringing those things home. So he'd have tapes of, like I remember, I think the first time I ever heard any sort of hip hop of any kind was the Funky 4+1, and I think it
Mm.
was Illinois. Yeah, yeah. So it was like that. That was it's like the very beginnings of it. It was about as early as I think you can get it on the West Coast, probably. Um, and so just from that on, so Curtis Blow, Sugar Hill Gang, Treacherous Three, just that whole movement of things just sort of coming along, and early on, it's like you didn't get to didn't even know what they look like, which was amazing. Like to not know what like your favorite artist looked like. I had no idea what Kumo D looked like until like maybe like later on I realized he was Beat Street. Um, but I didn't know what he looked like until he did his solo stuff really, and then saw Beat Street again and was like, oh wow, that was Kumo D the whole time. Like, but yeah, it's like you didn't get to really experience certain certain things in the culture until a little bit later. But like, yeah, that was my introduction to hip hop. I was hooked immediately though because I knew that it was a culture that was made by people like me and for someone like me. So like as a child, I was immediately hooked.
That's dope, dope. Juju, take over, brother.
That's a strong part, man. I'm like, bro, I'm just sucked into the story like the same way I did with you with Raheem, man. All right, well, no, you've definitely given me a few bits that I'm definitely interested in. So, hip hop being a massive influence on your life, which like I suppose all of us here, it has been and moved us. But what was it growing up? What was it that started to gear yourself towards art? Where was it that you started to realize you had a flair and it's something that you enjoyed as a passion and wanted to take further?
Yeah, it's interesting, like just with the arts in general, and I consider like almost anything that I output as a part of the arts, be it film, visual art, fooling around with sound of any kind. Um, it found me though, which was kind of it's crazy like how you know, sometimes your calling is your calling, and it found me, and I've never let it go since. I had influences from family members and from like friends in school, and like when you're at a very young age, you are encouraged in the areas of the arts, and that was sort of how it happened for me. Just like discovering tools, and drawing was one of the
Mm,
first things, and it was something I could do at any time, and it was like also something that was considered acceptable. Like there's something I can do almost anytime, and discovering it, and drawing, and just it's sort of like a form of therapy for me almost. It's like journeying to a place um, that is undescribable. It's really, really tough. But when it found me, I knew that it was a journey I wanted to take. I love the process of creating things. And I discovered that first through drawing. And so growing up,
mm,
like, and I think, like with music, and the culture of hip hop being around, it was just those notions of creativity. One thing feeds another, and so like those things would reflect in my artwork. So like even I'd say wow, like I was like I would say like my frustration job, which is crazy, but like my first real official like illustration job, I was in the ninth grade, and a teacher, I drew so much, like I had it's crazy, like literally during my lunch times at, because I went to a crazy middle, they call it middle school now here in the Bay, but it was a junior high back then. But I spent so much time drawing that I was given a case, like one of the glass cases in the hallway, to display my work, because I was
oh,
always drawing. So I had this glass case, like whenever I was done with work or whatever, like I would display my work inside of this. But like my one of my teachers approached me about doing a bunch of drawings for my ninth grade yearbook, and I did a bunch of like just with all the slang words of the time, the fashion of the time. So like everyone's got like high top fades, wearing polka dots, like it's like the Kwame era
Yes.
during that time. And we wore Nike Cortez, um, acid wash overalls, and polka dot shirts, and we had lines in our, and high top fade, like, so like I'm drawing these pictures like within a, and so it's like it's really cool to kind of look back on that. But like that was like one of my first, like just sort of initial art jobs, where it was like, like feeling like I'm a working artist, like preparing something for print. Um,
mm,
and yeah, like the culture of the area always reflected in whatever work I was doing. And there was a huge music and dance and revolutionary culture in Oakland, like growing up, for sure.
mm. So touching on that as well. So because so you mentioned you're born in 75. So that's going up from 75 up to where we are now. There's a lot of major changes that happen to especially in the stateside within black communities. And as we know, the crack and cocaine epidemic and all of the like as well, especially considering that you are on the West Coast as well, so close to that Hollywood, that LA, that lifestyle where all of that stuff was pretty much going on anyway. So what was it like, other than your art as your release? What was it like for yourself growing up through in Oakland through 75, through to even like the
Yeah.
90s and
So
2000s?
yeah. So wow. It was so for sure. I mean, like I'll start by saying this. Like just in growing up in that time, like we in the Bay Area, our we don't have a gang culture like Los Angeles does. Our gang culture was different
Mm,
growing up within the black community. So like in the black community, it was about like neighborhoods more so than colors. So like, a street, one street would not get along with another street, but you wouldn't be immediately identified by what color you had on. Like that was definitely more Southern California when it comes to the black community, the African American community. The color thing came along in the Latin community a little later in the Bay Area. But yeah, for us, it was really, really interesting, like to experience, I would say when I was in elementary school, Oakland was a very different place to me. And when crack hit, it I saw the community deteriorate in a way that, like it's so hard to explain, but it was like, like the businesses that were thriving in East Oakland just like they were closing, and people were like, areas became so much more dangerous. It was like, like this was also a time where, like, you know I remember experiencing, like, it's a shame I have to say it like this, but it was like the
mhm.
first shooting I ever experienced was probably when I was maybe in the second grade.
So
Um,
how old's that for us in the UK?
so it, yeah, so that would I was in second grade probably around 1982, and so like,
Seven.
just,
Wow.
yeah, so I was about 7 years old. Um, and I'll start just by saying, like, I was definitely I grew up in an area that was not dangerous, which I'm super fortunate for that. But we were in a dangerous city, and if you wanted to do what, and so I was fortunate, like at 7. I would say I was fortunate to experience a lot of things through my brother and sister who were 8 and 9 when I was born. So, like, at the age of 7, my brother's 15, my sister's 16, and they couldn't do a lot of things without taking me along. It was like, you want to do that, you got to take your brother, like that kind of thing. And so, luckily I wasn't a lot of trouble. Like I followed directions. I didn't wander very much, that kind of thing. And so my brother and sister had no problem taking me wherever they went. But because of that, and through that, I experienced a lot of culture earlier than my peers. So like at 7, I'm at the skating rink with my brother and sister at night, on a Saturday night,
Mm.
and I'm hearing all of the music of that time. So if you think about 82,
Yep, yep.
we're listening
Wow.
to Message, and
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. So these are things that I'm experiencing. But yeah, at that time, crack crack has hit, and this is the era of a very famous drug dealer of our area, Felix Mitchell, who
Mm,
he was he was someone who I have heard. I don't know if it's fact or not, but he had an operation that was very similar to what happened in the movie New Jack City.
Okay.
And so he ran the 69th Village Projects, and it was sort of like the concept of what the Carter was in
mm,
the movie New Jack City from 1991 with Wesley Snipes. Um, and he had a full on operation where he was moving crack, and it was spreading all throughout everywhere. And so yeah, during that time you start to see a change. And so there was the first time I ever experienced a shooting was at the age of 7, and it was after a night at the skating rink, and was with my brother, and everyone would go to there was an AM/PM that sat on I think it was like Foothill and 106 in East Oakland, and all the kids that had gone skating were there, either like everyone's hanging out, they're grabbing something to drink and some snacks because that's probably the only thing open, and we're waiting on my mom to pick us up, and yeah, out of nowhere, I mean, like, there's girls out there, there's, like the whole thing. And so, like somebody drives by and they just start shooting. And then I know, and then everyone starts running. And that was the first time, like for me, that I realized that, like there's I had to be aware of, like there were environments where I could be unsafe, and I didn't know
Right.
that before. Like I hadn't experienced any of that, and I hadn't. So I, like that was definitely eye opening, but it was a change. Like from that point on, that's how, more and more progressively, especially moving into my teenage years, that's how functions ended, was either through a shooting or an altercation, or the police broke it up. But it was never like, okay, party's over, everyone go home, see you next time. It was never like that.
Mm.
And I think that crack had a lot to do with that. And so you talk about the effects of the crack era in the Bay Area. Like I know when once I got to like junior high school, which was you would say wow, maybe 1986. I'm entering in, so like 86 through 89, 90. Um, and this was the seventh, eighth, and ninth grade for me. I was experiencing I was experiencing other students and children who were going home to parents who were either absent, on crack, like they had adult problems and they were kids, like and so I was very naive to these things beforehand, because I was fortunate to come from a family that was intact, um, and hardworking parents who kept me from those things. And so to experience that and to see that was very, very eye opening. To have crack just sort of invade the community, it was horrifying, really, to see it happen.
Damn. Well, yeah, man. I mean, we can definitely tell from all of the from from all the documentaries and such that you come across that it was definitely something vile. But to think like the age of 7, and that's the first time you realize that there goes the neighborhood. Like legitimately, that's I couldn't even fathom that, to be honest with you. But then again, born in '85. By the time I've come of age, here in the UK, crack is it's just as dangerous as it is anywhere in the world that you come across it. So, but
Yeah.
skipping the needle. So, because of your documentary, the Till Infinity of the Souls of Mischief, was it the case that you knew them personally because of being in the Oakland area, or was it something were you just connected through friends of friends, or is it just because they're from Oakland that you created it, or were they your peers at one particular point?
Yeah, they are my peers. I've throughout my entire life, I've known them from day one.
So,
I was Yeah, so it's grew up in the same neighborhood with Hyro, but just when I say day one, it's absolutely from day one, because Festo D's dad and my father were best friends, and so
oh, sick.
meaning, like, like they were each other's best man in each other's weddings. Like they were like best friends, and we were, like Festo D and I, like virtually, like at a very young age, were sort of like kind of grew up like cousins early on. In that, like if our fathers are hanging out, They're like, okay, you guys go out and play. They're playing dominoes and drinking and having a good time. It's that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so like from very, very early on, and elementary school, I was so like, we were all in the same neighborhood. And also like in elementary school, I remember meeting A plus in the fourth grade. Um, and yeah, he's the same person to this day. Like he's like A plus has always been the same. Um, but he was the first. He was like as a child, he spoke like an adult, like crazy. Like I always tell him that, like I was bugged out on like how like he was just. I mean, like A plus is not. It's not just a name. Like he really got good grades. Like he was the smartest kid I knew when I met him. Um, but yeah, so we were all. I've known the guys from High Road very very early on, and came to know as the crew was formed. Like it, when I say the crew, like as people know them today, High Road was a very large group of friends. Like you have
Right.
people who are either from certain neighborhoods or hang out with certain people from certain schools. Um, they were a part of a group of friends that I would hang with from time to time, and yeah, so I was around them and got a chance to see them develop from very early on. When I mentioned A plus, like Adam was always like, I mean, very like just serious. Like he would never say I'm gonna be a rapper. He'd always say I am a rapper. Like, and we were in junior high, and he's like I'm a rapper now, and like, and people thought he was absolutely crazy. But he was dead serious. Like that was what he was gonna do. And yeah, I had a chance to watch them develop over time. Like I definitely listened in on many a cipher, during school, after school. But it was a cool thing to watch them develop because they were so far ahead of, like we had the culture of sort of doing it yourself, like through Too Short, like seeing Too Short do his thing. And that was, we were kids and Too Short had tapes, and like he was releasing music um when we were growing up and selling it out of his trunk beforehand, like before, like being on television and everything. We were experiencing Too Short through the tapes that were circulating around Oakland. And, like, of course, again, through my brother, I got that experience because he is a little younger than Too Short, but close, like in his age group. And so, he was bringing those things home, and like to hear that stuff as a kid, was like, oh my God, this is like no other
Yeah.
rap. Like he's rapping about things that you just didn't hear other rappers rapping about. Like um, so it was distinct. But and I think that we all like those in Oakland from my generation, like born in the '70s, definitely were influenced by, it was the music of our area. And we didn't, Too Short was it. We didn't experience, and Hammer came along a little bit later on, but like we didn't experience, like E40 is synonymous with the Bay also, but he came along. I know for us maybe 89 or 90, where he was like, it definitely prominent on the scene, like, but before that it was like Too Short. And yeah, it was Too Short. It was Too Short early, but that influence was there. So seeing Hyro do what they were doing, like they were making music in their basements, um, and that was like no one was really doing that except Too Short. You know what I mean? Like we didn't know of anyone else who was like really like serious, but they were so much like they, just to be clear, like the cats in Hyro were like unique individuals. Like like they dressed different from everyone else. They stood out, especially like, you know, moving into like the high school years. Like they were they were like, so they were celebrities walking around on campus almost, like because, you know, Dale was a little bit older than us, and there was always like this talk of like, oh yeah, like he's related to Ice Cube, put music out, and like there was just always this sort of talk, and then it happened.
Mm.
So like in 91, it happens, right? And you know, like 1991, I am in the 10th grade. So if you think about that, the, you know, like most of the guys in Hyro were like maybe a year or two ahead of me. So like
Hmm.
Casual's still at school with me. Opio's still at school with me. Pep is still at school with me. You know, like I think Pep may have come in the 12th grade, but like we're all at Skyline. And most oftentimes, like a lot of the lunch times, like they would have the sound system they would pull out on Fridays, and it was sort of like an open mic. So they put a beat on, and they just let whoever, you know, wanted to rhyme, they let them rhyme, or like we'd have like these, you know, like cool lunch times. And whenever Hyro did anything, they were, I mean, it was like a real show, you know. It was like watching a real show. And I really, you know, like now thinking about it, I really, because like I was learning about television production from the 10th grade on up. And I videotaped a lot of the football games. I had permission like from the, you know, I was at a student run television station. And so I'd have access to this equipment, and so I would get a hold of cameras, like television production cameras, to like film our football games, our basketball games, and some of our like assemblies.
Mhm.
But I really wish I would have like videotaped some of these lunch times, but it was just like something that happened every Friday, you know, like it was the norm. Um, but they were, I mean, like at that time, they were already on television. They were in Dell's videos. So like, you
Mm.
know, Dell had his first album out, and you know, the guys I grew up with, the guys who were, you know, in these videos and you know on Burnt, they're walking the campus of my high school. Um, so yeah, it was cool to watch them develop for sure. But I had
That's
a unique a unique perspective just watching them develop.
That's dope. I mean, because obviously we've got you here. The whole I'm interested in the whole hieroglyphics thing because I mean now more so than I suppose, especially here on this side of the pond, there's a big more push towards of getting in back in touch with your roots and connecting with the ancestors. There seems to be a lot that becomes it's come now more on pop culture for us within our communities to sort of look into that. But whose idea was it to call you guys like hieroglyphics and to take that kind of whole Egyptian vibe and then say, yo, this is what we're gonna be.
So, as I understand it, so I should make it clear, I'm not a member of the hieroglyphics crew.
Like, yeah.
They're definitely close friends. I had a chance to watch their development.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I understand it, just from because I learned a lot about them that I didn't know just through doing these films. And
Oh, sick.
yeah, yeah. So, because it's, I mean, like how often do you sit down and interview your friends? Like you just kind of know what you know about them and that's that. But I from what I understand, the name hieroglyphics came from Dell, I believe. Um, and they had a number of names, but I think hieroglyphics was the one that stuck. And like they're a crew that, I mean, like if you ever hang out, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to like hang out in a room with them, but they are very forward thinking, very like they think outside of the box a lot of times. And so I'm almost certain that that was how their name came about was just sort of thinking, recognizing the past, but thinking towards the future.
Mm.
Because they're always sort of pushing the envelope with ideas and just outside of music, they inspire thought for me around so many different things. Just like recommending certain books to read, or just they've always been like forward thinkers, and I'm sure that's where that came from. Just super super innovative, creative guys.
Yeah, talking about
Interesting.
innovation, and like seeing through the future. The beautiful thing about the group is that they were like the first rap group to have a .com when the .com first exploded. For
That's
some
forward thinking.
historical reference.
Well, yeah, that's a prime example of what I'm talking about. Like, it's they're not afraid to take a chance, and they've been always sort of especially like with technology, they were one of the first for sure to understand the power of the internet. And like when they split from their respective major labels, they were in a position where they said, okay, we can either sign with another label, or
Mm.
we can start to reach out to the fan base that we have created through the internet. And to understand that in the mid 90s is pretty remarkable,
Yeah.
because the industry that exists now is, it didn't exist then. So, to say let's go independent and reach our fans directly, because we have this internet, as this internet tool that exists, it's like that's very very forward thinking, because no one was doing it at the time. I
Mm.
believe they say it is said that Naughty by Nature may have had a website around the same time. We're thinking like maybe it's probably like late 96, early 97. Um, it's up for debate, but yeah, one of the first for sure.
Definitely. And quick, can you? Because I think people that want to sign to major labels, it's important that I bring this out there, because I think the one thing you put in the documentary that was really important about Social Mischief is when they were trying to be signed to different labels. Can kind of talk about that importance of what they did and what they were able to accomplish that no other acts were able to get in their contract. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, so they were able to secure their publishing, and
Mm.
they own their publishing for this is something that apparently Jive never did. Just from doing the interviews about this, Jive never signed away the publishing to anything for anyone. So not Britney Spears, not NSYNC or Justin Timberlake. No one else ever had this. And it was, I think that they were they were at the forefront of understanding ownership, and not just being happy about being put on. Like it's like everyone wants to get on and have this opportunity, but they understood that in the long run they were going to need to have some sort of ownership around their material. And I think that Opio's stepfather, who lawyer, he was I think a big part of that negotiation. Michael Ashburn, who was already cemented in the industry. He was someone who probably was perfect for them just to negotiate a deal like that. And yeah, they got what they wanted. I think like it's a historic thing, because now I think you hear a lot of artists talking about owning their publishing and their masters, and just ownership in general of their creative property. But
Mm.
in 1992, there wasn't a lot of talk of that. at all. Yeah, so
And that's
incredible.
important.
Yeah,
Not De La, not Tribe, no popular group at that time had that kind of deal that they had. And like you said, they were trailblazers
yeah,
when it comes to the business side of hip hop.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And that continues. I just with just with dealing with them, they've always got they've always got some new ideas. Some like Kaz just started this virtual movie theater. Like
Oh, sick.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty incredible. Like how they've been able to sort of stay at the forefront of what may be coming next. And it's a great inspiration. I think just for anyone who may be
Mm.
looking to get their creative content out. You can look to these guys and figure out how to protect your content for sure.
No, for real, for real. Like I say to anyone creative, man, your only worst enemy is yourself most time out of 10. Put it out there until you get the feedback you won't know. But also touching on
Yeah.
to the doc, because I think that's quite interesting. Is how you put this. Is that well, one, what was it? I mean, like you said, you wished back in high school that you did record the every Friday ciphers, which would have been dope, just as like sort of, for me being just a hip-hop geek all the way through and through, just to watch them pre-ciphers would have been dope. So was that part of the encouragement of where you started to take the footage? Because there's a lot, I mean, you've got like artists like Fife Dog, you got Prodigy that say they're two little pieces, so rest in power to the to the gods themselves. And I mean, you've got an array of so many dope artists who are just shouting out, the power, Souls of Mischief, and and your friends have actually delivered. So that's one half of the question. And the second half of the question is, like you said, what was it like interviewing your friends? Because you know them. So for you, that must have been a bit of a different way of approaching this.
Yeah, yeah. So just for that first part, it's really it's crazy like that. So let me sorry about that, guys.
No, that's okay. Don't worry
It's
about it.
all right. It's all right.
You're good, bro.
Okay, so like yeah, with Till Infinity, there were that I wanted to capture a time. Um I like there's this the like the your coming of age time is always sort of a special time, no matter like whenever you're born, around the time of you're like a young adult, you're a teenager sort of entering into your 20s. um that time you're just sort of coming into your own, and for me 1993 was that time. I was 18 in 1993, class 1993 out of high school, and the fall of 93 I was entering into art school, into art college. And so 93 till infinity was my soundtrack for that. So it holds a special time for me, just because of kind of entering into the world around that time. um and just in hindsight, like, yeah, I videotaped a lot of things. And like I even have some of the footage from that time. Like I'd say I have like an interview I did with A Plus from
Mm.
1995 that made it into Till Infinity. And so while I didn't have the presence of mind in high school to record the ciphers, a little bit later on, I definitely, and I think it was just from my influence of being around, students from all over the world, like, just the kids I hung around with in art school were a big influence on just understanding the the value of documenting things, understanding that the time that we were in was a special one, and that we should record our movement, because when you are just when you're accustomed to hanging out with a group of people, you don't necessarily just pull out a camera and start recording everything that they do. You just hang like you always hang. Um, but being in art school, I recognized that not everyone at that time had access to the type of equipment I had access to, and not everyone was learning how to video edit like it, like now you can video edit on your phone. But at the time when I was learning the early things I was learning for just around television production and film production, that wasn't a regular thing. Wasn't a day to day like it. This was exclusive, kind of like you had to know someone or be a part of a program to learn how to video edit or to learn how to do like um, the things I was learning. And so I did recognize that, and I started videotaping different things that whatever was going on. And yeah, some of it made it into the documentary, which is kind of cool,
Yeah.
because when I shot some of that stuff, I had no real, like I may have had a project in mind for it, but like in 95, I can say like, yeah, I started shooting till infinity in 1995, really. um because I did, a couple of interviews with some guys. Like I would take a camera to KMEL, and I do like I videotape Sway doing his show um every once in a while. Like it was just the environment that I was in, and the group of kids I was around at that time. And like I'm glad that I did decide to do that, ultimately, to turn the camera on them, and then like to talk about moving on into the film, and and just with how the culture evolved, and sort of expressing. I really wanted people to kind of understand what it was like for us growing up in the area we grew up in, and how Hyro became the group they became, and why they made the music they made. Um, because we were from a very unique pocket in Oakland, and it was where we were all from pretty intact families, where, like, you talk about having parents who were hardworking, and they we were we had good Christmases, you know what I mean, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
um just the basics, nothing over the top, nothing but, like, we were from good households, and
Mm.
had educated parents. And it was a huge piece in the development, because if you think about some of the stories that I tell until infinity, it's like, you have to think about what parents, who would actually let their 13-year-old go to Los Angeles to record a demo.
True.
Like, it's like, if you're thinking about like a parent that, that kind of understands the arts, or like I don't know, my mother would like, oh yeah, mom, I have some friends who make music in LA, and they want to record a rap I wrote. And I'm 13 telling my mom, like, I don't even know if my mother would let me do that. But, like, so like, when you think about that, it's pretty incredible that and I know some of the guys' parents, and like, yeah, I totally get like how their development happened. But it was a special time for sure, because I think that areas of hip hop were being explored in a way that that was still new. In a sense, it was fresh, new, and exciting at that time. Um, and it was a great feeling to kind of, like, what was going to be coming next. And at that point, at that time, in 1993, they were next. And that was, like, incredible to see, like, these guys that I grew up with on MTV and BET and the Box, like, crazy.
And real fast, we got to give people their flowers while they're alive. Talk about the impact. To me, I felt like on the Bay side, I think Tech, Sway and Tech are the Dr. Dre and Ed Lover on the Bay side. Can you kind of talk about the impact they made on the Bay, but just in hip hop in general?
Yeah. Sway was huge. Like he was so like I do remember also he was one of those people who sort of had like this. I mean, he's from Oakland, but he's still he's this way to this very day. He has this open door policy. Like he doesn't put too much on anything. It's like if you're serious about what you're doing, like he doesn't have a problem with opening up that door for you. Um, and it's amazing. Like his just he he was on the radio at a time where you didn't hear a lot of hip hop on the radio. But he had a radio show. Like we had radio shows, so like they were all college radio. So you talk about Kevy Kev, DJ Kevy Kev. He's from New York, but and there's a couple of Kevy Kevs, but the Bay Area Kevy Kev, KZSU Stanford. Um, and he had a show called The Drum that ran from wow, in 1981, 82, all the way on until 2000 and something. I mean, like, has to be the longest running hip hop show on the radio for sure. Um, and you can catch him on Instagram now doing the 2.0 version of it. Um, and that's my people. But then also you had JVD who was doing something at Calex, but like you didn't like on KMEL, like that's like the major radio station here. So like um to have Sway on the radio playing like what you would consider like real hip hop, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like there was sort of a on the surface hip hop that was getting play here and there maybe, but like a real hip hop show that played everything that you loved and enjoyed, just not just the surface stuff. This is who Sway was, and he was super cool. Just with like, I mean, like if you had some sort of connection with him, and like for me, we had a lot of friends in common, and so I would end up at like in the studio at his show. Um, and just to hang out sometimes to videotape things, but he always had like this cool sort of open door policy where it was like, if you're a hard worker and you're about your business, he would entertain you, just in like, yeah, you can hang around, you can learn some things, I'll connect you with some people. Yeah, Sway and Tech, the Wake Up Show, and he also did a show called the 10 O'Clock Bomb, which was incredible, here in the Bay. Um, and that was the footage that you see in the battle was captured during the Wake Up Show, by a close friend of mine from art school who had the presence of mind. Also, he was like it was that era where he had like a high camera and he took it into for the battle that night. Which is just amazing. It's amazing because
Mm.
I don't know if anyone else who was in that room has ever released or knows where that footage is. So this is the only known footage of that Casual and Saphir battle.
And you
It's
think about it, it's kind of crazy when you talk about the battle that he had to have a video camera. Because if you think about it, in the day we live in today, everyone would have had like their cell phone and it would have been on IG Live. And
yeah,
they would
it
have just
yeah,
took away
Everyone would have known.
yeah.
that.
Would have been everywhere. It would have been everywhere. But we're talking about this was November 18th, 1994. You know, so
Yeah,
it's
these
like
cameras are expensive.
yeah, yeah. So it's like if you think about that time, it's not only not only was it there's a process to it, but like, to videotape it, but then also to hold on to the footage all that time. Um, is amazing. But yeah, my friend who, like, he scored the battle. He actually scored the film, but then also contributed the archival footage for this piece. Alex Asher Daniel, who is an amazing visual artist, and makes music, does a little bit of everything also. Um, and yeah, he had the presence of mind to take a camera that night, because to hear him tell it, and this was, like, we actually we met each other around that time in art school. Um, and I remember this was very soon after the battle happened. We were hanging at his place, and he was like, "Oh, yo, I was at the battle. Check out this footage." And I had listened to it on the radio, but I hadn't, like, there was no video of it, but he was in the room. And so yeah, he played the footage, and this was just like footage that I knew existed from, this was, we met in 94, so this was around the time it happened. I knew he had videotaped it. And fast forward now to present day. Well, I say I started the process of making the battle probably in 2013, 20, around the time, kind of spawned out of Till Infinity in a way, because I had so many key elements from the interviews I did for my film, Till Infinity. I said I have to tell this story about the battle, and I was aware of this footage. Fast forward, like, Alex and I have been working, on various projects from that time on, from knowing each other in art school all the way up to now. And he worked with me on Till Infinity. And yeah, I hit him up and I was like, "That footage you have of the battle, like, I've checked all over YouTube, I've checked in as many places as I can, and there's only audio of this casual Saphir battle. Like, what do you think of putting something together around this footage that you captured?" And yeah, he was all for it. Um, because, like, this is something that it's hip hop history. And, to share this with the world in this way, like, with both MCs, I hadn't seen Saphir in, you know 15 or so years up to that point. And, so to catch up with Saphir and to have him tell his side of the story, and had Kaz do his side, and it was, just amazing to have them sort of recount this, like, to settle their differences on the microphone. It's like, what, can't get any more hip hop than that, it's like,
Do that.
it's just amazing. It's like, "Oh, you have a problem with me? Battle it out on microphone." Like, that's, I love that notion that
Yeah.
they decided to do that. Um, and so, like, to tell that story now, I think is more important than telling it then, because um, we're now in a time where the the true essence and elements of hip hop have, they've evolved, they've changed, and it's good to sort of, I I would say I would say it's important for people to sort of revisit what the true elements of hip hop are really about. And I think that this piece really kind of displays that. It's like, we're gonna sell this on the mic, and it'll be done after that. Um,
And the
yeah.
beauty of the documentary is that, in hip hop we have this beef culture. And the beauty of that documentary is that at the end of the day, it was just a misunderstanding. That's what it was. Can you kind
Yeah.
of and now everything is all love. after that, they were all, everything was good after the whole incident and everything like that. But can you kind of talk about how it kind of all started from a misunderstanding? From what I know was that uh, Casual had Sheriff on his track, and then he wanted Casual on his track. But what happened was he's like, I guess something came up. He wasn't able to do it. He was like, "Oh, let's can I do it another day?" And he's like, "Nah, nah, nah, nah. You're messing up my money, nah." And can you kind of? I know I'm kind of going everywhere about it, but can you kind of talk about what kind of that kind of caused the battle?
Yeah, it was just a misunderstanding, right? It seems like it could have been something that could have been easily solved. Um, but it's like we're talking about 220 something year olds at the time, 220 something year old male rappers. Look, like, so you're talking about egos, you're talking about all these factors that can go into it, and yeah, it went left, and it became more than I almost, like, both of them definitely expressed, I mean, like, they were friends, and I met Saphir through the Hyro crew, so, like, they were friends in the beginning, and so when you talk about how something can go left and, like, really, just kind of become something more than it needed to be. Like, this is definitely the case. It's like, I think about Making Till Infinity. If I took the approach that, like, happened with, how that battle ensued, like, I'd have had a bunch of people that, like, that couldn't make it a certain. If I had, gotten upset about that, I'd have had a beef with a bunch of people. Like, it's, just thinking about it in that way, it's like, what I mean? It's like, people definitely don't make appointments. People, like, it's, and you could have a full setup and be ready, and they won't make it. It's like, but this was, I think that, like, in this case, I'm glad that it didn't escalate past, a battle between crews over the mic. Like, for the most part, I mean, like, you don't have a situation where anyone, like, got, like, significantly hurt, or like, loss of life or anything like that. This was, yeah. So I think that that's another moral to the story. It's like, I think Saphir said something along the lines of, like, it wasn't on the level of having to deal with it, like, he didn't have to deal with it on a street level. He just wanted it to be addressed. And so I think that it was the perfect way. It's like, hey, like, we have a problem with each other. Let's just battle it out live.
Kind of the more mature way, in many sense of the word, and also watching the footage as well. Shout out to Sway and Tech for handling it. Sway was just like, yeah, now stand in the middle just in case, keep these lots split up just so it doesn't boil over. But I mean, this is also another reason, because for me here in the UK, we didn't hear about, or I wasn't aware about Sway and Tech until I was in my probably about 1920. So that's probably, yeah, like we're talking about 2005. So, and you got thinking, like, you guys, where you already, like, how deep with Sway Tech? We're talking, this was in the sort of 90s and such. So for I only became aware of it because of a friend of mine who was more definitely a lot into the more underground and more obscure side of hip hop rather than just your commercial bits. And he actually put me onto this, the wake up show where you had, like, the Eminem freestyle, and all of that. That was that collection of, like, tunes off it. I'm not going to embarrass myself because I can't remember the full listing of people who were on there, but ever since that point, I wanted to, like, I mean, Sway's definitely on one of my lists. If we can ever get a hold of him, and he's got the time for us to do something similar to this. But yeah, man, like, that's crazy. But all I can do is say, well, thanks for bringing it to the forefront in the world. To actually be able to physically see that. So for us now, especially, as hip hop's going on, and as you've mentioned before, hip hop's evolving so much. So we find that when we was talking with Ra, there's a lot of cases that people are, because of the generations are going, we seem to be losing a lot of the information and ways that can be handled. So now I just want to say thanks again for that, Shomari, man, for real, and bringing that to light to us.
Definitely, and then one of the big things that me and Shomari is we grew up on the boom bap area, and in the '90s, hip hop was regional. Like the only time, you had the West Coast, you had the Bay, they had their radio station. You only heard stuff from the West Coast. You rarely heard stuff on the East Coast. If you do, you probably hear it late. On the East Coast, you rarely heard anything from the West Coast. It was strictly East Coast, and that's like nothing really in the South was going on. Really, I know they were coming up around that time, but to understand the significance of Souls of Mischief, that soul till Affinity joint, that it broke through to the East Coast. When people from the East Coast heard it, they thought these dudes were from the East Coast. They thought they were from New York, and when they found out they were in the Bay, that was like a culture shock. Like, yo, these dudes from the Bay, and they spitting like they from New York. What's going on? And the market kind of contest to that.
Yeah. That just talks about the influence. I mean, like, of course, when hip hop spread to everywhere, the first I think of everyone's experience, like early on it was New York hip hop early on. Before there were other, hip hop from other regions. And so that influence is there. You talk about, the influence of Too Short and what, he was about, but then we, like, our area we weren't growing up in, like, like it, for example, like Tajay's parents are professors, so it's like if your parents are Stanford professors, how will you sound? Like, so he's gonna, like, use large words. He's gonna, like, have extensive vocabulary. He's gonna, like, and so I think it just reflected in just from the influences of New York hip hop, but then also just sort of being unique. It was a time to be unique and explore these different ways of approaching hip hop. And I think, like, they mixed in a bunch of different elements from a bunch of different places, but being lyrical, I think, was at the forefront for them. This was a time where respect in the culture had to be gained through the culture itself, as opposed to like it's stuff like now, if someone has a large amount of views, that is considered, that's where the respect comes from. So they have this amount of views, but it's really hard, like, when you talk about culturally what the impact is. And so at that time, it was about gaining respect. You showed skill through like how, like MCs were technicians. Like we talk about Big Daddy Kane, or like it's like, just this idea. Hold on, just a second, guys.
Yeah.
Just this idea of like doing music in a way where you're looking to impress. They're like, look, we want to be on the radar of a Kane. We want to be on the radar of a Rakim. We want KRS to know who we are. I think that was their approach at that time, because the respect of the East Coast was an important thing.
Well, they definitely did that, to say the least. So much so that, yeah, Till Infinity Night, like, definitely is still 93 to Infinity. Sorry, to get the full title correct. It's still one of my favorite hip hop jams of all time. When I was doing my radio shows, it was one of my easier go-tos, especially on the Sundays that I had, because it's just, it's like, I mean, it's hard to even place it. Like, unless you knew that they were from Oakland, you would just think that they were floating from like the East Coast, or they're just kind of like that kind of universal artist based as well. So now mad shout and love for that, like 100%. So has she got anything else, Dad? Or was there anything else going to ask? What else can we expect from Skyfyre Productions and yourself? What other mysteries and hidden gems have you got in your bag?
Okay, yeah. So it's Skyfree Productions. Just
Oh,
I know
Sky3,
it's
sorry.
yeah, it's tough to it spells
Yeah,
weird, but like yeah, I there isn't anything, like I always like to say that, like, even it there's gonna be something that'll come along that'll definitely speak to me that I want to get out. I'd love to tell more stories. Um, I'm not sure what is next film wise. Been focusing a lot on my visual art stuff lately, and so
nice.
we will see. We will see. I am always open to telling more stories. There's so many that can be told. Um, but I don't want to jinx anything. But I definitely have some ideas, and when something is concrete, I'd love to come back and share for sure.
Definitely appreciate it. And one more thing I want to bring up because I feel like, you know, I feel like it's right to bring it up. Right? It's the 12-year anniversary of the murder of Oscar Grant. He died on New Year's Eve. Um, I think was it? I don't want to get the date wrong, but it was just having a good time. A ruckus happened, and a cop killed him. I know you lived not too far from there. Can you kind of talk about the significance of when that happened and how, when you talk about police brutality, especially with the death of George Floyd uh, and a host of different names, can you kind of talk about from the past to now and how you personally feel?
Yeah. So I being black in America, being an African American male um, in this country is an experience that you cannot you can you can only relate to another African American male who has also navigated through this, because it's an experience like no other. It's like, and I have a 12-year-old son that I have to have this talk with. I mean, I've had this talk with him because he's growing and he's getting bigger, and it's like there's this moment when you go from being a cute child to being a threat, and it's a very important thing to understand that you you will be treated differently solely because you are a black male in this country. And I can't stress enough how how often daily, it's especially like before the pandemic hit, just navigating through life, how often you're reminded of that, even in an area where, like this is probably one of the most diverse cities in the United States. Um, but we talk about how we're impacted, like just understanding the role of the police, and like not feeling protected by the police, but more so like when the police are around, like I'm definitely not someone who fractures laws, who breaks laws. Like I'm
Mm.
usually, like I'm in my places of business. When I was younger, I was in my places of business. I was, in school. Like I've always been, someone who has done my best to be in a positive place in life, and that that isn't a factor when you're talking about appearance alone. Just just from what, like you look like and who you are will determine how you're treated by the police. And so, like while I've never fractured any laws, like right, I besides speeding, running a red light, or making an illegal U-turn, like those sorts of things. Um, Besides that, like I haven't fractured any laws, but I've been handcuffed. I've been in the back of a police car solely because I was a young black male. Um, and so when you talk about that dynamic and what, like you talk about the pipeline that we are experiencing here. So, um, it's like, and this is the reason why I don't fracture laws. One slip up and my life is virtually over. It's uphill already. But if I go to jail in any way, then I, like we're talking about employment and issues around that, like trying to secure a job to take care of your family or whatever that is, you you're already in an uphill battle. So then if you add these things to, so it's like, the things that are targeted toward us. We're talking about alcohol, drugs on every corner, right? Readily available. Guns are readily available. It's like I can step outside of the building I'm in now and get those three things very easily, like immediately. I can get a hold of all of those three things, and they're all products for negativity, right? Because if I'm caught with any of those things on me, right, I'm headed on a certain path. And so when you think about the education system that has been set up here, it's like what the information we've been given or taught. So like I mentioned my junior high school and the environment I was in. Part of part of the reason why I was in the library all the time is because of the ruckus that was going on the yard. So it's like I'm gonna go to the library and I would draw, and I was trying to stay on the right path, but it's like we were virtually more so than being taught, we were being babysat. Like um, my most important lessons and the things that I learned that were most valuable were handed to me by my parents. The books, the most important books I've read, the most important life lessons. Scholastically, these things are all passed down to me through my parents and through very, very special teachers, but the rest had their hands full um, trying to deal with children who had parents who were on crack or were, from these broken homes. And so when you have this environment that you're coming from and you're entering into the world, there's only so much of a chance you have for survival. And because of these elements, like people are online making comments about why, like I have a friend who asked me, he's from a very different community, he's white, um, and he's from like, we say through the tunnel or over the hill. So like, there are a bunch of suburbs that are on the other side, away from Oakland and San Francisco. It's a very different environment, like in Walnut Creek and Concord. And he asked me, he's like, well, have you ever thought about like, he's like, why are they in this position in the first place? Like, why, like, he's like, George Floyd was under the influence and he had these things going on. Like, why would he put himself in that position? And I had to, but it's, like, he's a friend of mine. I feel like it's important to give him the realization. It's like, look, we this is what we're fed. Like we don't have, if you don't have that opportunity in the first place, you don't it's not necessarily a decision, like sometimes, like when you're born into an environment that breeds certain things, like you can't blame the individual. You have to take a look at the bigger picture and what, like has led to this person's circumstance. It's like if you're in a position of being oppressed over a certain course of time, there's certain ways that some people are going to drink alcohol to cope. Some people are going to take
Yep.
drugs to cope.
Yep. Yep.
So like, and it's like, and when it's readily available on every corner, it's like there's two things you see almost in every corner. It's like there's a church and there's a liquor store.
Yep.
It's like, and these are, it's like, so, but most people are going to both.
Yep.
But like, you talk about what's readily available for us and what resources are available and how much of a chance we have under those circumstances. It really starts to make the picture clearer, and it's very, very tough when we're, as a community, being geared, like our biggest, like some people are called to, like, I think the Souls and Hyro were called to make music at a very early age, and like that's a beautiful thing, but that's not everyone's calling. Like, we're not all meant to be rappers, we're not all meant to be entertainers, we're not all meant to be athletes, but we're pushed into these, we're that those are our only ways out of the communities that we've been born into. And so when you have this slim shot at, I mean, like, who, there's no way, none of us are LeBron. Even people in the NBA are not LeBron. So it's like, when when you when you talk about that, and how much of an opportunity you have to shoot for that dream, what is really left in the aftermath of all of that, right? It's like, even if you do make it as an athlete, if you do make it as an athlete, what do you do after the age of 30? If you become a professional athlete, what do you do with your life after that? So like, and the same with entertainment. It's short-lived, quick sort of ideas of success, not longevity success. And so I definitely have an issue around, and really, really hope to see and be a part of a change around the full system of with which our communities are growing up in. And so like, I don't I don't know how, like, because like, when you're born into it, you don't really realize what's going on until you're a certain age, you've been told or whatever it is. But like, the dream of becoming an entertainer, athlete, and ducking and dodging through every obstacle and trying to come out unscathed is almost impossible. Um, and so this is what we're up against. And so when we talk about a young man like Oscar Grant, who lost his life under those circumstances, um, it's it's truly, truly a shame that we are put into these positions of disadvantage, and then we're hunted almost by, and we are demonized by the authorities that are supposed to be, well, quite obviously they're not protecting us, they're protecting someone else from us. And and once that's put into perspective, and I think that culturally, like, it's always kind of been there, it's always kind of an undertone in the narrative. But now you talk about what has happened here, like, with, I don't know what was different for with the George Floyd um, situation, but somehow or another opened the eyes of a lot of Americans, a lot of people in the United States, who were previously, I guess, unaware that this was going on
Do you know,
because
I think
it's
with
been
that one,
commonplace for a long time.
yeah, because I mean, this is, I mean, for especially once you start looking to peel back the layers. Because you know, from me growing up in the '80s, as I've mentioned before on this podcast, is that I've grown up in the sugar sprinkle version of America, the TVs, the sitcoms, the, you know, the bright, the flashy. That's what we get sucked into over here. So when we think of America, especially when I was younger, is you want to be out there because it's the land of opportunity, and that's where hip hop is, and you see all these great things, and this is what it could be potentially like for you. But you know, as you start peeling back and you get these stories, you know, it starts to really show the horror story of what it is. And the main thing that I've got from my group of peers, from what I've understood about the George Floyd thing, is one, we were in a pandemic, right? So we're in a completely unprecedented time. So people are now glued to their phones and to their screens. So no longer can you ignore it. You're already now stuck in your own feelings, because a lot of people during this period of time haven't found themselves still. For people like us who have hobbies and interests, for us it's like, okay, cool, so we're supposed to step back on the burner. That gives me a little bit more time to find, you know, give myself a little bit of free time as well, and then I can then focus on projects or discover new things. Where now you've got a whole bunch of people who, you know, they've been taken away from their hustle and bustle. So then all of a sudden you see this happening, and to make it worse, it was filmed for 9 to 10 minutes. So that's the same length of what if someone who's really interested in a YouTube video will watch, because most people's attention spans, especially on things like Instagram's only 3 seconds. Now, if you're willing to go past to even the 60-second, or then even furthermore to your 5 to 10 minutes, that's someone who's invested into it. So there's probably going to be people then now looking at it and thinking to themselves, well, it's not just the fact that, you know, it's another black person dying. It's not happening in a 3 to 60-second clip. So, you know, they must have done something wrong. In this case, they can physically see the pleasure and the fact of it's happened. And then on top of that, you've now got people who haven't got a way to, you know, push what they are, their narrative, or they might have and some people have it in work. They've got something they do, you know, collect money for the dogs, or, you know, for the shelter of the homeless and these things. So it's now just put a massive radar onto that, and eyes onto the situation. And that's just what kind of sparked the whole thing off. And I suppose it just gave people an excuse to go out onto the streets again and kind of get a bit of freedom. So is it right that it happened? Hell no. That I will definitely say that, you know, 100%. Was it needed to happen to get it to this actual state? Not taken away from the countless of deaths, and that's not even the people that have memorials. You know, we're talking, like you just said, being black, you being stuck in the back of a police car, and that could have gone loads of different ways. And especially when you hear about the violence with the Rodney King in like LA, and that's where the first kind of visual sense of police brutality was shown, was from the West Coast. So I just think it was a combination of things that just needed to happen, and that was kind of just a spark which was necessary for the conversations to happen. What I don't appreciate is the whole narrative again. It's like, oh, it's not going to happen overnight, and this is going to have to be now a longer based conversations. But at least it does give us a little bit of leeway. So, you know, the stuff, you know, it's like you said, it's like, how do we change the system? Because you've got the whole sports thing on your side, and it's pretty much similar to us over here. It's more with football, I suppose, and to be like even like a grime MC, or an artist or an entertainer, you'll find more people of you know, or as we call it, BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnics. A lot of us want to be more on the entertainment side. So in the sense of being presenters and, you know, journalists and things of that nature, because it kind of, you get a bit more of a different sway and you don't get, you know, bucketed as much. But you're right. For us, there isn't much opportunities at all. You're literally fighting a whole bunch of people for a very small slit to end, you know, to try and end up somewhere where you're not stuck in a poverty-based situation, you know? So that's just my 2 pence on it.
Amen to that, brother. You speaking to the choir. But Shomari, brother, man, I thank you, King. I thank you for taking the time to be up and early with us. 7 o'clock.
Appreciate it.
So I appreciate you, man. Hopefully, if the planets line right, that you know, you probably do a documentary on Oscar Grant, because I feel like his story hasn't been told. I know they did the movie version a long time ago, but I think his story needs to come out and what's going on right now, because I know the family's trying to reopen up the case. I think that was in December. So I think in this current state, I think that story is more irrelevant more than ever today.
Yeah, absolutely. That I do believe that there have been a few reports in the past week I've seen on our local news around the family, and I believe it's Oscar Grant's uncle who has been the spokesperson for the family, and it seems like they are they want accountability um, from the BART police who were involved, and it looks like only one of the officers has been charged at this point, and it was I'm not sure the circumstances, but the family is looking for justice, and we just hope that uh, they can receive what they're looking for.
And the only way we could do is just keep on telling that story, man. But again, my brother, I love you. Thank you for being on episode 2 of the No Name Podcast. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Shomari. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, especially if you stay with us to this end. So peace, love, and all that good stuff. And we got much more coming your way. Peace.
Peace.